I love Night Elves. Is that a controversial opinion? I don't think so. I feel like they've been around for such a long time in the Warcraft lore that most people, at least Alliance players anyway, really enjoy playing them and everything to do with their lore and their backstory. That's my feeling anyway. Actually, the second character I ever made was a Night Elf, and I still have her. She's gone through a few name changes, but she still exists. She's still one of my mains. Actually, just for interest's sake, my first character was a Draenei, and in fact the Draenei were the reason that I bought World of Warcraft in the first place, but that's a story for another day. How many of you remember doing the Night Elf starting zone for the first time? Whether it's just one character or several, however many elves you might have on your account. I remember Dolinar very clearly and just how cozy and comforting it felt, all the way up in the branches of this enormous tree, kind of cuddled by nature and just very familiar. And if I'm being honest, Darnassus, which is the capital city of the Night Elves, is one of my favourites. It's just grand. When you walk up the stone path, the path that leads you through the gates, and you see these huge buildings opening up in front of you, it was amazing, especially as a first-time player. Even now, it was and will always be one of my favourites. Now, I talk in past tense because the world tree that this was all built on, Dolinar, the capital city of the Night Elves, is gone. It no longer exists. The Night Elves as a whole race have been refugees for a few years, and in the newest patch, in the newest expansion, they're about to get a new world tree. And that tree is grown from the souls of their dead. How did this even come to be? It's a very long story. The Night Elves are one of the most ancient races in all of Azeroth. And I initially was just going to make this video to cover what the new world tree is all about, Amirdrassil, how it came to be, and then I realised if you want to explain what Amirdrassil is, you have to go back, and then you have to go back, and then you have to go back, and further back, and it just never ends. So this may end up being a history of the Night Elves in a couple of parts for anyone who might be interested. So new WoW players, people who've never touched WoW in their lives, people who want to catch up on Night Elf lore, especially as they've been in the forefront quite a lot recently. But yes, to understand Amirdrassil and what it means to the Night Elves and the hope that it brings to them, we're going to go right back to the beginning. Night Elves are a pretty strong presence in the Alliance, so I think to begin with we should go all the way back to the beginning and ask ourselves the question, who are the Night Elves? They're actually one of the most ancient and long-lived races on all of Azeroth, and they were previously immortal, but we'll get back to that in a little while. They first began as dark trolls around 15,000 years ago, and they came to settle near the Well of Eternity. Now, the Well of Eternity is basically a pool of water which is infused with magic, very strong and potent magic. And that magic is comprised of the world's soul. And the reason it exists is because of the Titans. I touched on this a little bit back in my previous WoW lore video. But basically, one of the Titans ripped up an old god from where it was buried within Azeroth, and the wound that was left behind became the Well of Eternity, where the planet's energies and life force was spilling out. And it was the prime source of magic for the whole planet at that time. Now, these dark trolls were among the first to study magic and use it freely in the world, and this was about 10,000 years before the First War. They settled next to the shores of the well, and over time, their exposure to this very concentrated magic elevated their forms, so they became elegant, they became very intelligent, and they became purple. Over time, they gradually started worshipping the moon goddess Elune, who would be a linchpin of their culture from that point onwards. And they founded the continent of Kalimdor, which at this very ancient time was one huge landmass surrounded by ocean. And from this naming of the continent, they called themselves the Kaldorei, or kaldorei. There are different pronunciations depending on what you prefer. But in their language, it basically meant the children of the stars. Their kingdom became huge, and it spread across pretty much the whole breadth of Kalimdor, the ancient continent. And most of their time was spent studying the Well of Eternity and the magic that lay within it very intently. With their awakening, they drew the notice of the wild gods, so the gods that exist primordially in nature, and primarily one of those was Cenarius. You may have seen him in game a few times. He looks like a grand centaur. He loved the elves dearly, and they loved him too. Some stayed with him completely and left their civilization to study under him, and over time, their forms changed and they became dryads. But in general, the elves grew great empathy for nature and for the forests around them. Now, so it continued for very, very many years, thousands of years I would say, until the rise of Queen Azshara. Queen Azshara was basically known as the most beautiful elf to ever exist. Everyone adored her. She had a favourite group of elves named the Highborn. They were like the upper class, the nobles of society. And they were given positions of power and called princes and princesses, even though they had no real royal standing as such. This group of Highborn were very much laser focused on magic and the arcane. In fact, they actually loved Azshara so much that they renamed the capital after her and called it Zin Ashari. As they grew in confidence, they went after some of the troll tribes that still existed and had splintered off. Never mind that they were related, that they were ancestors, they just wanted the elves and the Highborn to rule the continent without any disturbance, and this caused some trouble with the trolls over time. So obsessed were they with magic and the arcane that they actually became reckless with its usage. They performed a lot of very questionable experiments that sent arcane out into the twisting nether. The twisting nether in this universe is just space, the blackness of everything that lies beyond Azeroth. So their magic experiments were sent out into the twisting nether, and it actually started to have an effect on some of the elves. The Highborn that were under Azshara turned their backs on nature, for instance. They forgot their devotion to nature and the wild, and they became very closed in and suspicious of anyone else. Now, here's where it all starts kicking off a little bit. So they've sent the arcane power and concentration out into the twisting nether, and they actually caught the attention of the Burning Legion. Who are the Burning Legion? They're basically demons and corrupted beings from beyond space, so out there in the twisting nether, from other planets, other universes, however you might want to think of it. They became very aware of this concentration of arcane being pumped out, and they actually formulated a plan to take over Azeroth for themselves. This is when the demon Sargeras posed as a god and actually managed to convince Azshara to open a portal for him, to bring him into the world and allow their lives to flourish while worshipping him. And she actually did it. She created a portal, believing Sargeras to be a god, and allowing him to come into the world. And the portal she created was in the Well of Eternity. Now, of course, while there were elves who stuck to the arcane and the use of magic and were addicted to its power, there were also those who remained true to the original calling of nature and the wilds and still believed in Cenarius. One of those was the druid, very young at the time, Malfurion Stormrage. Malfurion remained absolutely devoted to Cenarius and his teachings, and he brought his forces to stop everything that was happening, stop the portal, close it, and destroy the well. And it worked. However, and it's a big however, when the portal and the well were destroyed, the entire continent of Kalimdor imploded. Just because the concentration of arcane power and all of the confusion of magics and different forces coming up against each other was too much for the Earth and Azeroth to bear. The continent blew apart and became the separate landmasses that we actually know today and that we can see in-game. So Kalimdor the continent, the Eastern Kingdoms, Northrend, Pandaria, and right in the middle is the Maelstrom, a swirling mass of water, a vortex pretty much, which is the original location of the Well of Eternity. When this happened, Azshara and many of her highborn followers sank to the bottom of the sea, and they became what we now know as the Naga, kind of fishy, lizardy beings. You know them, you've probably fought a million of them, I know I have. But this was a huge shock to the elves. This was absolute destruction, and it caused them to completely turn away from the arcane, reject magic, and basically banish it from their society completely, fearing that it would cause the Legion to return if they ever dared to use it. This is where we'll leave the Night Elves for now, at the brink of great change in their society and just generally in the world as a whole. I know, big cliffhanger, I'm sorry, it's 10-minute worlds. But in the second part, we're going to find out what happened next. The planting of the world trees and the emergence of the Night Elves to become one of the most stalwart members of the Alliance. For now though, I really hope you enjoyed. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment, whether you're a Night Elf enjoyer or not. Let me know what you thought of this video. Please also leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. As always, it means the world to me. And I'll see you in the next video.